We're live.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Danny, the Devon Ranger,
The
and
beard.
the audacious Bethany Vota. Alliteration
I
aside,
don't have a beard.
Bethany and I are without beards. That's why Danny's the center. His beard is the centerpiece.
I've got enough beard to cover both, like all three of us, so it's all good.
Perfect.
So, what are we here to talk about today?
Beards.
Beards. We're definitely here to talk about short stories. Why the heck are they important? I personally think that short story, the power of short fiction, it's like lifting weights for writers because it's a chance to get through the whole process of coming up with a story arc, completing it, and then seeing what you've written, and then a chance to go back in and fix it. Where with a long, you might have to wait 6 months, a year to see the finished product of a novel, or in some people's cases, 5 years. So let's just kind of go around the world of all three of us and see, what does short fiction mean to you, Bethany?
I started out like ultra short, so flash fiction, like under 500 words. And if you can make an impact in those few words, you've got something. And then I moved on to something a little bit longer where I can expand the world. Maybe I could do a sci-fi short story, but it really trains you to be precise. You can't afford to info dump. It's super obvious. And it's just encouraging because you can finish something in a couple of days, get some feedback on it, and like create this really polished piece. And it's just great practice for that. So that's where I started, and that's what kind of gave me the courage to like pursue like a tracker, something bigger. It's because like, okay, I've got short stories down. I know how to write them in a way that is not info dumping. It's not cliche. The errors that you put into a short story are so blatant and obvious, which really help. Whereas like, long fantasy series, like your errors just kind of simmer at the bottom and then explode in your face later. So that's my experience. And I am writing a short story collection, so I do feel like really passionate about this. Like it's hard. You don't just write a bunch of stories one week and decide to publish them. They need to be like tight, pristine, pack a punch, and it takes a lot of work. How about you guys? What do you write?
I think like when you're talking about what you said at the end there, I think short stories have also got to have that pacing, because like I've noticed that with Lydia, there's a rhythm. The whole story seems to follow that rhythm, especially like the revised version, follows that rhythm. I think also short stories are a really good way of implementing what Kent's doing now on his channel, the 5 commandments of storytelling. Because that, when you think about it, this is a really good exercise to implement that. Heck, you could even put the hero's journey in there, couldn't you?
Yeah.
In 5,000 words, you could definitely have that. You could have an arc and that sort of thing. So you could practice that stuff and cover it all in like 3 days, because it only takes you that long, really, if you spend an hour a night to write a 5,000 word short story.
So short stories for me were really, well, I didn't do it. I'm going to say why I think they're important, but that isn't why I wrote them. It's just because I keep thinking of stories and then I write them down. Like it almost isn't it's not like hey, I need to write short stories so I can get good. It's like, oh, if this happened, let's see. So I just get excited about it. And anytime I finish something long, I immediately start writing something short. And while I'm editing, I'm writing short stories all the time. So since I just finished, we lost Bethany. Back.
Ooh. She didn't like your answer.
She didn't like my answer. I just finished a full-length novel and immediately started writing short stories while I was editing another novel because I think it's absolutely critical. She's back. Hello. Missed you while you were gone.
Don't know what happened. Continue on.
So what I was saying, I really think that I'm always writing short stories. So like in between projects, sometimes even at the same time, which I really don't recommend. But so if you want to get good at something, you do it over and over, right? Like if I want to play a new riff on my guitar, I start slow and I play it over and over again until I get good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're always writing something long, you're not doing things over and over again. You're doing them once. And, you complete the character arc, you complete the story arc, but you just did it one time. and that takes a year. So how many years will it take for you to get good at completing a full story? But when you write a 5,000 word or 15,000 word story, I've written about 1 million, about 15,000 word stories. I'm not kidding, close to 200. And some of them are awful. But it's repetitions. It's like lifting weights. I'm doing it over and over again, starting from the beginning, getting to the end. So I think that's the real power of short fiction. Hey, Don, what's up, man? And I honestly believe that if you only write novel-length things, the learning curve is way longer before you get good. That's my personal opinion.
I think you'll learn to like complete your work, because if you were to only do novels, like how many starts of novels would you have? You know, reaching an end and learning how to write a satisfying ending. And like I'd imagine, you know, for the first few short stories, it's a bit hard to get right. And then like even when you're talking about ideas, like I had an idea a couple of weeks ago for a short story, and I've already written the first draft of it. It's only, at the moment, the first draft's only 2,500 words, but I got the idea down and I got the ending that I was looking for. And then after I wrote that, I started thinking about the story and started thinking about how I could flesh that out. And like I was thinking about it when I was doing things like, you know, labor at work. So thinking about how I could flesh it out. So I find that by doing that, you've got a basis for a story. You've got something you can exercise your writer brain on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And Bethany does Flash, which I've never done Flash. And I think I'm going to start trying because I read some of hers and it's really interesting. And that's the time to work on the beats, like story beats. That's to work really polished story beats. And it's something writers don't think of all the time. I'm gonna go full story nerd. So hang on, I'll throw Renee's comment up here.
That's what we're here.
So I'm gonna go full absolute story dork. And like I talked about in my last video, so there's a bunch of units of story. It starts at the beat. Beats make scenes. And a lot of people think in chapters, but I don't, because a chapter is just a grouping of things. It can be one scene, it can be several scenes. I don't think it's very meaningful as a unit of story. I think a scene is, which is generally one unit of story where a value changes. You know, you think of it like a scene. People can come in, people can come out. It's generally in one place. We don't switch places. But within that scene are all these little beats. And each of those beats need to have an inciting incident, progressive complications. And when I start saying this, people go, that's impossible. No, it's not. So the doorbell rings, inciting incident. I don't know who it is. You go to the door and you're like, hey man, that guy that's been after me might have found out where I live. Just that thought is a progressive complication. Now you've had a crisis because you have to decide whether you're going to open the door or go get a gun. And then the climax is seeing what you do once you had to make the choice. So the resolution is what happens after. That's just a beat. Haven't had a scene yet. So when you really want to get good is when you can, or when you want to diagnose your little pieces of story, go back and make sure that's happening over and over again. Make sure there's lots of choices being made by the characters involved. If there's not, bad things happen because it gets boring. Because we're not coming to a point where we have to make a decision over and over again. And without it, things just fall flat. Have you guys ever heard of the 5 commandments before I started bringing them up? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd heard of I haven't heard them called as the 5 commandments of storytelling. I've just heard the 5 things mentioned in different, craft books or websites.
Okay.
But your way of thinking of it's better.
One thing I love about short stories, though, is it allows you to experiment without ruining a potential book. So, for example, this is the first time I've ever started anything without knowing the ending. But I was like, you know what? I might kind of I might pants this a little bit. I might see what what kind of comes of these unfinished characters. And I wrote a 5,000 word, almost finished story, cannot figure out the end, cannot do it. And I'm like, I need to scrap this, outline it like my normal way, and then I can write the story. But it was just I want to see if I can listen to my characters like some people love to do, and I can play around with it. And you know what? I'm out a couple of days, 5,000 words. I'm not out months or years because I found out that my outlining method didn't work. It gives you that fun time to experiment.
So I like to try things that sound like they're not going to work at all in short stories. Like, well, the one we're going to be talking about today, Lydia, I didn't think it was going to work. So let me give you a better example.
Lydia?
Actually, I think Bethany's read this one, I'm pretty sure. So I wrote a story where I was trying to make a kind of a mass shooter relatable. And it's called Redemption. And so I started writing it going, I'm probably going to hell for doing this. But I think that's how you grow, is like you try to do things that are really uncomfortable and really hard. And in doing that, you discover new things, not just about like what you're writing, but about like how you really feel about things. What do you think, Danny?
I think, yeah, I totally agree. Also think that, like, especially with this like latest short story I've written, it's a good way to find out whether what you have, like the scene I have in my mind, is actually going to be believable, or whether there's going to be some hurdles there that I'm going to have to overcome. And there were. Like I wrote it, I'm like, why would he do that? And would this be acceptable in this particular scenario? So then I've thought about it, come back and gone, yeah, I can, if I just change this or if I do this, the whole short story is now believable. The characters are making logical choices or making choices that are clearly driven by their emotion. Yeah, so I think it's good for experimenting, like Bethany says, but it's also good for practicing even research. Like I had to research things to make sure it was believable.
So before we get into start talking about Lee, I got some questions to ask you when you start writing short stories. So I outline big projects, but I pants the crap out of short stuff. So I don't have any other plan besides what if somebody did this, and I just let it go from there. Hey Richard, and my buddy, longtime Twitter buddy Richard Holiday, been chit-chatting back and forth since before I started doing author platform stuff. Love to have him around. He's a talented writer. There's stuff up on his website. Go check it out. And I like what Jasmine said here. She thinks unlikable characters as the main character is way cool. So I've done that a lot. I have a short story called Something Missing, where the protagonist is a horrible human being, and he has one day to kind of get revenge before he slips off into the afterlife. I like writing horrible people a lot. I don't know why. I really like the villains. And I think in short fiction, like you can't drag someone through horrible things only so long, like in a long novel. But in a short story, I can take you right to the depths of the worst possible thing you can imagine and put you there just for a minute and see how you take it. And that's one of the things I love about it. It makes me sound like a horrible person, but you know.
It's kind of like, you know, what Stephen King said, you just write a bunch of interesting characters, put them in a situation and see what they do. It's good for that too. I think it's really good for learning to like have an algorithm for each character. So does that make sense? So you can, if I was to put in, you know, for example, Brian from Secret Santa, the short story that I wrote, my first short story that I wrote, and Leadvane into the same room, what would happen? I don't think Brian would have a good time. Oh, that's it. It's a good little experiment. But because I've managed to have a voice for each character, sort of know what each character is going to do. Yeah, you can just put them into a situation. You could put them into a boxing ring. How would this play out? And just let it go.
So that's really interesting the way you said that. So I'm always talking about structure, but I'm also always saying, like, it's sometimes fun to just let things happen. So I think you can do both. I think you can understand structure and wing it at the same time. And the more you understand structure, the more your mind is going to pull things into that without you having to plan it like crazy. I'm not saying you shouldn't plan things, but what I'm saying is the more that you understand and study structure and map it out, and then as you're reading things that you've written or reading things other people have written, and you start looking for structure in it, and you understand the black moment, just there's a lot of different names for these things, but they're all the same thing. The stages of the hero's journey, inciting incidents, progressive complication. Once you know that stuff, your brain will start doing it on its own. And you can kind of jump to the head of the line by knowing that stuff. So
well, and once you know the rules and the general format and what you can do, you can break them. Sort of. You have a greater authority, you have a greater understanding, but you can't just go in and say, I'm the exception to the rule, and then you don't even know what the rules are anyway. So it's just, short stories are great for refining skills, whether it's dialogue, writing believable characters, whether you info dump and world build. It's just perfect for refining and improving over and over and over. It's just like a workout. And honestly, they're so much fun to read. Like, someone is more likely going to read your short story than your big book. I mean, like, that's my family. They're like, give me your shortest of shorts and I'll read it. It's fun.
Yeah, because time's a commodity. So people want to read your shorter stuff.
Yeah, and you're asking a lot of people to read your long experiment as opposed to your short one. So if I give you 15,000 words, of a interesting but maybe a little difficult thing to read, maybe not the normal kind of thing, then you can stay with me through it and maybe see how it works out. But if I hand you 150,000 words, it's probably not going to happen. So,
well, the first couple of chapters will be read.
Yeah, they're not gonna make it through there. Angie, is that you? Yeah. Come in. Sorry, I have a person here who
the rock star.
Hello.
Director.
The director, the rock star.
So we're talking about short story ideas, Angie, and how we use short stories to get better as a writer and try new things.
Cool, that's awesome.
Angie just jumped directly into writing a novel.
Okay, we're having weather, so be prepared for some power outages.
Okay. Yeah, there's a storm here, so if we suddenly just vanish, that's because of lightning. But anyway, I also started writing long stuff before I wrote short stuff, and I think that was a mistake. Like, if I could go back, I wouldn't have started writing novels that I didn't finish. I would have written lots of short things and finished them. That's just my opinion.
I think also, one thing that I think should be addressed is that I was a victim of this, is that I thought that my story, even my short stuff, would be 1-2 drafts and then done. So a lot of people, but the thing is, like, a few people I've been talking to, I've been reading some of their work, I think sometimes they think that it's all right, okay, so I write the first draft and this is almost a mirror of what the final product's going to be. And now I've learned that's like, no, you could write your first draft to get your ideas down, let them flourish and flower in your brain a bit, and then revisit it and really change it, like really dig deeper and address some of the core issues. So I guess a short story gives you the opportunity to edit and revise. Like I said, you're going to be waiting a while before you finish your draft of your novel, especially if it's 150,000 words, and then you're probably not going to want to jump back in and start revising it straight away. So
I love Renee's comment here, and Danny, just kind of wow, it's really raining here. Kind of add to the. It sounds like somebody's walking on the window. It sounds like footsteps. So loud. But anyway,
it sounds like a creature is just.
Yes, creatures. But what Renee's talking about here is that all of us kind of understand structure inside us like that, and that's what guys like Carl Jung, the psychologist, and Joseph Campbell, who really kind of codified the hero's journey. They weren't discovering these. I mean, they weren't making these things up. These things were already there from Gilgamesh and the Bible and every Beowulf and every old piece of writing that we could find. The Egyptian, the Norse myths, all of these things follow a pattern. That's just a human pattern. It's not. They're not. Sometimes when I'm trying to explain structure to people, they're going, "Hey, man, I just want to write free. I want to do this stuff." I'm like, that's not real. Stories are things. They have a shape. If you do them in the wrong shape, they are not stories. So to ignore them, unless you have just brilliant instincts, and then I would say don't mess with it. Because like if you're putting out stuff that automatically is structured and everybody reading it goes, this just is great, then don't mess with whatever's happening. It's magic. Leave the muse alone. But if there's something that's not working, that's the time to start using understanding structure to figure out why it isn't, and then you can fix it. And the more that you do that, the less you actually have to think about what structure is.
I have to be ear to ear to dad to fit in the.
Angie knows the hero's journey. That's how she plotted her novel. So she understands what each of those things are. So she knows she's not leaving something major out of her story.
I kind of look at structure as kind of like the directions for when you're cooking. It's like you can have your noodles and your can of pasta sauce, but you can't call it spaghetti. Like you need to know how to, all right, I need to boil some water to make the noodles soft. And then you still can't have like noodles and a jar. Like you need to know how to make it all come together cohesively so it's palatable and people want it. Like, sure, yeah, here's your box of noodles and your jar of sauce. Like it is spaghetti, I guess. But the structure is like that direction of like, okay, here's how we fold it all together and here's how it works.
What's going on, man?
I actually knew the hero's journey a bit before he even started making YouTube videos. Like I knew the hero's journey before, way long before Starlight even popped into my head.
Do you write short stories too, or just go for the big ones?
She's going straight for a novel. She helped me plot my last novel, and while she got inspired to do it, so she started plotting. She's always been writing stories and comics though, since she was 0, since she could pick up a pencil. So it's probably my fault.
I came up with the title too. I came up with the title.
My tablet.
So I get no credit for anything.
My phone.
Don't worry, that's fine.
It's getting chaotic. All right, kiddo. See you later, sweetie. Say
Bye.
Yeah, that sounded like Bethany's bye.
And bye.
Bye. Okay, I had to get rid of her before she took over the live stream, like she takes over everything else in my life.
You guys should do a live together. She can be in one room, you can be in the other, and converse.
Yeah, I wouldn't get a word in. But so we're also going to talk a little bit about, and I think Danny brought up a good point about editing. You can't practice editing on novels and get good at it because there's just too much time between flash and bang for you to really see, like, did it work or didn't it work? And it's such a giant time commitment. But you can edit, and I am a baby at editing. So, and this is kind of like what the stream is really about in the first place, is working with an editor so that I can learn how to edit. And that's where Bethany came in. So I took a really old short story, which was a concept short story, meaning I said, you know how everybody says don't ever do a story in a white room? You get white room syndrome. It's bad. You can't see what's going on. I said, I'm definitely going to do that. So
quite literally.
So I decided to do, it was an experiment. I wanted to do something hard. So the same day I finished my very first novel, 180,000 word whopper called Children of Doom. The day I finished it, I wrote Lydia. I wrote a little over 10K words the same day I wrote the end on my first novel. So, and I wanted to try something different, completely different than what I was writing. And I wanted to really put the screws to myself. And I didn't have a plan. All I had was potentially two people in a room, and one guy's questioning the other guy. I kind of like the Matrix, like, the Agent Smith questioning Neo. Or I also had this idea. If anybody ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or read it? It's great.
Yes.
Jack Nicholson with Nurse, whatever her name was, questioning him. So
Yep.
that was the idea I had, and I decided to just start writing, and I didn't know what was going on. So I didn't have a plan. And while it's, oh, thank you, Orla. Orla says she enjoyed Lydia, so good, I'm not spoiling it for you. Spoiler alert, it's about to start getting spoiled.
Yeah, everyone go stop what you're doing, read it, and then come back.
Yeah, go read it and come back, or watch this again. But so all I had was that concept of people questioning each other. So you can imagine that the structure of the story was crappy as heck fire. I don't want to curse. Okay, hell. So HEW hockey sticks. The structure sucked, and I knew it needed editing really bad.
Yeah, it was terrible, whatever we're talking about.
Yeah, totally. So the original version of Lydia was 10,000 words. The only thing I did, I came back to it and I cut it to about 5,700 words. I just cut out almost all the subplots and just made it one tight thing about one thing. And then I left it alone for, actually, there's a guy here in the chat that used to be one of my soldiers back in the day. He's out of the Army now. His name is Kason Gwinnett. Good dude. He's a freaking superhero. He's a real life American hero. So I'll give him some props. And he read this story in 2014. So he read, I think he read the original long version probably.
Back when it was born.
But I really think that, I don't even know where to start with this. I think it was so bad. That's why I didn't go back to it, because it's confusing and complicated and all the things that you tell everybody not to try when they're writing a piece of short fiction. So it was really difficult. And I really want to hear what Bethany has to say when you first got a hold of the raw piece as an editor. Like, what's the editor's standpoint when you get something that's so Byzantine and confusing and it has multiple levels of weirdness to it? Like, how do you start dissecting that?
I try and figure out the author's intention. Like, what is the goal? And we kind of talked about it. We're like, big man, little man, that type thing. And so I was like, all right, we can work with that. And then it's, does the setting do anything for this? Because I'm like, I don't care if you have a space opera. If we can take out space and the story is the same, that's just another level of confusion that we don't need. Or the character motivations, like, are their reactions genuinely realistic? Because I've read really confusing stories where it's like, why did they do that? Like, we need to know the why they chose to walk out on their family when we have no background. So I want to know what the author wants to get out of it. And then we just slowly start to get more clear. And then, I don't know, I'm sure everyone here has read it or not, but we follow one main character really through the whole thing.
Spoiler
And
alert.
then, spoiler, it's like we follow one person. And the confusing part for me was, again, kind of spoilery, but not really. We jumped back from present day, what is happening, and then we had background. And I was getting confused between the two because I was really, really relying on the background scenes to make sense of the present day scenes, which is fine. That's why you have some flashbacks. But then there was like another element to the flashbacks where I was like, there's another story within this flashback. I'm confused. And we just kind of tried to make that more clear. I don't know where he went.
So the storm, or he's just had enough?
I don't know.
No, I don't know. I remember when I first read Lydia. Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
So I remember when I first read Lydia. It was a while ago now. Back when sort of Kent and I were sort of getting to know each other a bit. And he said, hey, I'm going to send you some work. Can you read it? And one night I actually sat down and read it. Well, is he coming back?
I heard it all. Keep going.
You heard it all. When I first went to read it, I was just like, man, there's a lot of information at the start of this. Like, it's a lot to take in, and I just sort of left it. And then one day I was sitting in the shopping centre. The wife went in to get something, and I was just parked in the car. Had the boy in the back. He was happy. I was like, oh, I'll finish reading that story, and I was really glad I did, because the first thing I did once I finished it was send a message to Kent going, holy crap, man. Like, that just blew me away. And then I've read the revised version on Kent's website now. All the issues that I had are gone. It's so fluid. The ending still packs that punch. Absolutely. So worth reading. Absolutely worth it.
And imagine how bloated it was at 10K. So when I'm discovery writing, I'm telling myself stuff. So I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I use incremental repetition in the story. It's one of my a tool I use a lot, where I'll have a phrase that recurs. And often I had one pop into my head because I had this idea, like this guy was worried that he could lose his memories in this room. And I was like, I think, therefore I am, I think. And I'm like, I am, I think. So I just wrote it down. And then I kept writing it down. And that was before I named the story and before I knew what was going on. So I would just trusted my instincts on that. And then you get a lot of exposition because I was telling myself what happened to this guy because I didn't know.
It's a first
either.
draft.
So, and that's why it was super long at first because I just kept talking about, like, the guy's name used to be Jesse James, and I like had him researching because it's in the future, researching the Old West, and his parents didn't even know that was an outlaw's name, and his wife called him outlaw. So there's all this stuff, and I thought what was really neat working with Bethany, and I really want her to talk about some of this stuff. So first of all, I was terrified to work with an editor. When I say terrified, I mean like real, like existential dread. And here's just straight up what my fears are. If you haven't watched our Working with an Editor series, I talk about it a lot, but I'm not afraid to change things. I'm afraid of not knowing if I'm changing them for the better. And that happened. That exact thing I was terrified of happened. But
Yep.
We'll get to that later. I think that's probably the most interesting part of this whole conversation. But the most interesting thing about working with an editor is working with Bethany is I expected it to be about a 50-50. I like what she says, I don't. Honestly, in the final analysis, I feel like we were at like an 80% agreement rate. And I took a lot of her advice, like more than I ever thought I would take anybody's advice on writing anything. So that's a real testament to Bethany's skill. And I think to having a prior relationship before starting to work on it, I'd read some of her stuff, she read some of mine. I know you can't always do that commercially when you're hiring an editor, but God, it really helped because it always sucks when someone tells you that they didn't understand something you wrote or you should change something. But dang, I really did almost everything she said. And it worked out really good.
Well, and I think the main thing was, like, you pared down the story from 10,000 words, and there were still spots where I was, like, the whole Jesse James thing, the name, that clearly was important in the 10,000 word version, but it wasn't in the 5,000 version, but we still had references to outlaw, and I was like, okay, we need to, like, streamline this, cut it out, or emphasize it type thing. And so there's just like little clarity issues like that. But it's I totally understand why it's more comfortable. Like, you've read some of my short stories. Like, I think they're pretty good. I'm not just saying like, oh, I'm a writer, like, listen to me. But if you haven't read Lydia, so you were talking about like you just enjoy like certain repetition. That's part of your style. And I knew that going into it. And so I was always recommend, if you're ever editing for someone, read the whole piece, because I was like, man, what is up with this line? I think, okay, like, it's thought provoking, but like, why are we doing it? Like, it kind of breaks up some sequences. What's going on? And then at the end, without being a spoiler, it was like, oh shoot, I get it now. And then I was able to work with, okay, I need these lines in here. I see what he's doing, but like, we just refine them, put them in better places where it added more tension and it wasn't so obvious. We added some subtleties, and that was, honestly, it was like looking at a really pretty garden that was kind of overgrown with weeds. I just helped clear some of the weeds out so we could get that pretty thing. I'm into some imagery right now. But a lot of what I did was just clarity. And the biggest thing, and I knew it was going to be a big thing, was,
oh boy,
let's play around with the tenses. Let's go. And I knew that was going to stretch your brain, and oh man. But I'm so happy that you played around with it. I don't know if people have read it or not, but Kent didn't change the point of view. It's the same way that it was. But I'm still really excited that he tried it and played around with it. What was your, like, someone asked me, I don't remember who it was, but it was like a DM or a question where they're like, are you bummed that Kent didn't do what you said? And I was like, no, like, I totally agree. It worked better for the story this way, but I wanted to know if it was going to work. I needed to know because I thought it could be a cool thing. And how did you feel about that whole process of like, oh no, she wants me to change the tense
Okay.
point of view? What's going on?
So this is really big. So Bethany recommended that I change the tense and POV, or potentially switch back and forth between tenses. It's a third person past tense, which is my go-to, really. And no, Watson, I did not plan the ending that just popped out. I know he's not going to believe me. But she wanted me to switch the tense and POV, and I really wanted to get the most out of trying to work with an editor my first time. This isn't my first time. I have worked with a developmental editor before on a novel. I'm not going to get into that, but I almost didn't survive that process. But I really wanted to try what she said. So what I did is I wrote a series of experiments, and I almost feel like I should put some of them up. I really rewrote this story almost 4 times front to back in a couple of weeks. I rewrote it in first person present tense, which I'm not very good at. I don't write a lot of first person. I think that's usually better for being inside the head of a young person, because young people relate most things back to themselves, whereas adults have a broader, people that have been married or had kids, they tend to place themselves in the context of the world a little bit differently than young people do. And also, I really like to use figurative language. I like to use metaphor and stuff like that, you know, like a this, like a that, baby. But so I was afraid if I went into the first person thing, then everything has to be, every description has to be how that person sees the world. And I felt like that would limit me. So I wrote a series of experiments. I shared some of them with Bethany, and I tried literally every mutation and permutation of tense and POV. I even tried writing the flashbacks in first person present tense.
You went so much farther than I thought you would. And that's super fun. But I was like, oh man, did I like send him into this deep dark spiral? Is he never going to come out of this?
So
It's a snowball.
I actually got a hold of Danny on Messenger, and I was like, man, you may have to read some of these because I can't tell anymore if this is making any sense. But finally, what I did is I went back to, what's up, Heather? I went back to really what I'm good at, which is writing in third person, present tense, or excuse me, past tense. And the reason I like that the most is because all of my stories in some way are about, everybody's stories are, even if you don't know it, but all of my stories are about the balance between chaos and order. That's the theme of Lydia. The theme of the story is, in this case, order has gotten too strong. So there's a federal healthcare system that's become so dominant that they literally control and program people. So conceptually, whenever order gets too strong, like Nazi Germany, chaos rises up to smash it out of existence, because either end of the polarity, the spectrum of order to chaos, is not good. It's like kind of like politics, like left and right. You go too far right, you get Nazis. You get too far left, you get 1 billion people dead in China. You know, so like either you really want to balance between forces, chaos and order, and that's what Lydia is about. That's the whole theme, and everything has to have a theme. So when she told me to write in first person, it's like I couldn't see the good and the bad like facing each other. I got inside the head of one person, and it's like I couldn't stand back and see it, but I had to try it. And man, I gave it the college try, Bethany. I want you to know, like, I literally wrote the whole story in first person.
Oh, I know. And I didn't tell you. I was like, hey, I kind of want to feel more connected to the character. Try it this way. And I was like, in my head, like, this could work or it could totally flop because of the ending and all of that. If you haven't read it, go read it. I cannot believe you spent so much time with it, but it was more of like a suggestive exercise of, we need to get closer to this main character in certain parts. First person's a really great way. What can you glean from doing that? And I'm super impressed with what you wrote. It was good, but cohesively, it didn't work. But like your intro scene first person was really interesting, and some of the other ones, but man.
So without being too spoilery, you find out at the end of the story that the real protagonist isn't who you think it is. The real protagonist is the namesake of the story is Lydia. So I was playing a structural game that's incredibly difficult to play because you think you're following the protagonist and you're not. And there's a third person in the room that you can't see, and you don't find out till the very end. So that's what stopped me from actually taking. Honestly, some of the story read better with Bethany's suggestion of going first person present tense. And gosh, I got way better at writing in present tense. I've never done that much of it in my life. And I think I'm going to try some stuff now. So thank you, Bethany. But also, the reveal got wrecked, and I tried it from 3 or 4 different angles to fix it, and I just couldn't. And finally, I'm like, okay, you got to stop, man. I remember I DM'd Bethany. I'm like, I'm losing my mind. Like, stop. So here's some interesting stuff. So I've seen a couple comments. CEO's talking about editor horror stories. Bethany, can you kind of, well, actually, I kind of want to hear from Danny. Like, so you haven't worked with an editor yet. Like, what do you, after watching us do this together, like, what, have you learned anything new about the process? Do you feel differently about it?
Yeah, I'd say I've learned something new. I wasn't afraid to work with an editor beforehand. I'm still not afraid to work with an editor. But, yeah, call me weird. Because I'm of the mindset, it's like we're on the same team to make this project the best it can be. And like through other experiences in life, what you think you know or what you can see from your perspective is not entirely right. When someone from the outside looks in, they can see things you can't. So I really want to have that. So that way everyone that reads a story has a really great chance of enjoying it. But I'm looking forward to the process. I'm not even sure what work of mine I'm going to go with for the first, working with an editor scenario. But I will mention, when you're talking about tense shifts and perspective shifts, I wrote the current short story I've written is called Matt Garin. And Matt Garin is a man who's a financial expert. He holds these big, really popular talks. And the main character, a guy called Steve, and his fiancée, who's pregnant, called Lana, are going to this bloke. And Steve's dubious about this guy. And Lana is like, no, we need to get our finances in order. Let's go see this guy. He knows what we're going to do. And then Steve gets called on stage, and Matt Garin asks him to do something very, very peculiar. So I wrote that in first person present tense. And then I was listening to American Gods by Neil Gaiman, which is weird and awesome. And incredible. But listening to the way that he describes people, describes the world and all that. That's third person past tense. He does go in the third person present tense in parts of that story when it's a completely different, situation. And so I was like, I really think this story needs to be third person past tense. So now I've started rewriting it in third person past tense. But because I've started doing that, I've also, like I said, unlocked the ability to describe things differently. The arena, the lobby, the smells, the senses, all this sort of stuff. And I'm really thoroughly enjoying writing that way. And I think it's going to suit that story a lot better like that.
So you brought up a neat point there, Danny. And one of the editorial comments that Bethany made that really changed a lot of things for me was to bring in more sensory data, because I'm really dialogue focused writing guy. Like, I really like to hear people talk. I don't do a lot of stage direction. He went there, she went there. Like, when people start talking, they're just talking. And she said she needed more sensory information. So we're doing a white room, which is a really hard thing to pull off. And there's an adversarial dominance game being played by the antagonist too, who you think is the protagonist but isn't. And we lost track of it. And she made a comment. She's like, she repeated this comment over and over again, both in the editorial letter and in the what do you call it, the Google Doc, where it had all her recommended changes. By the way, those were great. I swear I took 8 out of 10 of those. I took them. Amazing. And I have a pretty good ear for that stuff. So when I see a good edit, I'm like, yep. And I jumped all over it. I really, man, so powerful because you can't see your own stuff. You get blinded to it. But
struggle with that myself. Yep.
So she said she needed more sensory information. And here's the tricky part. So everything Bethany said was like, you need to add more of this. You need to add more of this. You need to add more of this. And I'm like, oh, crap. It's going to get longer. And I don't want to do that because like editing is like you tighten things, right? You don't make them bigger. So it came in at 5780. I think it came out at 5780. I think it came out at 5800. So I added like 20 words.
Not bad by any means.
So I didn't just add 20 words because I try to give you that sensory data you wanted. I try to get more imagery, more feeling, more of what the guy was feeling in the room, and without taking away from the story. So I had to take a lot out. I think I took out almost 500 words of the original text in a 5K short story. That's like 10% of the story. So it was a significant reduction so that I could add that other stuff. And it's funny when you realize that all this stuff you've written, you can just take it out and the story is still there and intact. So
I'm going to jump in and say you had an amazing way of showing what the main character saw. Like you could describe a room and I'm like, yep, I'm there. But that's my job was like, okay, we need more balance because not everyone is going to appreciate that. Or like, okay, well, now we kind of need to know like other aspects to it, like the other senses. But like, I can see how hard that would be because you did create just through like the visual component a really great description. And you're like, I don't want to lose that. And so you had to struggle with, okay, how do I replace that? Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
So I always think, what do you guys feel about descriptions? So when I'm writing descriptions, whether it's in a short piece or a long piece, I always try to come up with 1 or 2 details that stand for the whole. I don't try to, there is a description in this short story where I describe how a guy is dressed more than I almost ever do, but I only wanted to do it because it contrasted so much with the situation. He was so out of place.
There was a point to it. It was clear that it wasn't just I'm wearing this and he's wearing that and he's wearing a funny hat and that's it. This really contradicted the main character and it made you think, you're like, it added to the story. It wasn't just an extraneous detail that could be omitted. Like, sure, you could omit it, but it's something I would have missed on the second read through. So like, I understand what you mean. You're like, it felt like a lot, but it added so much more than I think maybe you thought it did. But I'm just a reader, so.
I normally sketch people. I was actually thinking of reading the first part of what Danny's working on right now, Lead Vein. He did a really good job of saying very few things about the guy. God, I can see him in my head. Good job, Danny. And also in Bethany's piece, Tracker, the namesake, I don't know if I want to give away names of your people. Clay.
They might change.
Anyway. And like he was described by the things he'd done. So you get a little, there 2 people in the car talking about him before you meet him. And I can already see him and they hadn't described him. And I'm like, wow, that was really good. So I think that description can be overdone and it bloats your word count. And Renee just made a great comment. If you're describing it, it should have something to do with the story. And that's what Renee's saying. But
yeah. So
like if you're describing a piece of clothing that doesn't bear on the story, you've just wasted your time. It should bear on their personality. Well, Ben just took my comment. It should bear on their personality or the story or have something to do. Like if you have a magic system and everybody with blue eyes can do one thing, and everybody with brown eyes can do another thing. I'm reading Lightbringer right now. It's like a big deal, the eye color.
Yes.
So,
I was like, oh, so good.
So they should mean something. So I want to drag things back to the editing thing for a minute because I'm telling you, I've been scared of this for a long time. And there were some suggestions I didn't take. So we differed on some descriptive stuff, and actually, each time I didn't take her suggestion, I'm like, man, am I being a bad writer? Like, am I doing the wrong thing here? And so Bethany made it really easy, and Heather just mentioned it too. Bethany made it really easy for me because she started out in the beginning by telling me, these are suggestions. This is your story. I mean, is that something you run into with people, Bethany, where they think they have to do everything you say and like they like get worried about it?
Yeah, they're like, accept. And I'm like, no, you're not critically thinking about it. They just think that like, oh yeah, she's right. It's like, well, I'm human and one perspective. It's your story. And so it's always refreshing when I like see the authors like critically thinking of like, yes, this works. And then like the suggestions they don't take, it's like, okay, I know it's well thought out. They have a direction and their piece is just stronger. But it's really frustrating when and sad when authors are like, yes, I will do whatever my editor says, even though like deep inside they know it's not right. Like, you got to stick to your guns on certain things. If you know that your story is going to be great with this way, despite what your editor thinks, keep it. Like,
so it was actually hard not taking your tense and POV suggestion. Like I put more time into trying those experiments than I did rewriting the third person version. So, I mean, almost double the time. So I did run into that a little bit. I think that's also just because we're friends, and I do value your opinion more than just as an editor. Like it's freaking Bethany. But so I really gave it the college try, so to speak. But
didn't work.
I just couldn't pull off the reveal. And spoiler alert. At the end, you find out that this guy is being investigated basically by healthcare professionals who are now the scary people in the world. He's being investigated for acts of terrorism, and they think that there's this whole terrorist cabal that are using his skills to get away with horrible crimes. And they find out that at the end, there is no terrorist cabal. It's just him. And it's not just him. There's something inside him. So it's a big reveal, and it kind of makes you it's a sixth sense moment in a way, because if you go back and reread the story after you know what's going on. So I shift POV at the end of the story, and this is something most people tell you not to do. I shift POV from the person you think is the protagonist to the antagonist. And I knew you're not supposed to do that, but I wanted to make it work. And I wanted you to almost not notice.
So that was the thing. It was so subtle because the whole time you didn't head hop, you were consistent with the perspective, and then right at the end we get this little like switch, and it's like, wait a minute, that's such a rookie move. Why did he do that? That was so avoidable. And then I just kept reading, and I was like, oh, okay. Okay. And so it's one of those rules that you broke.
But I think it really works because it's like, for a lot of it, it's like, a big guy, little guy. And then when you do that perspective shift, it's like, you're experiencing the same thing in a different way, kind of. Well, I love it.
Plus, spoiler alert, I wanted people to understand that Jesse wasn't in the room no more. Like, he was gone. You can't see things from his point of view anymore. And that's why the first person didn't work. Because I tried. I couldn't. The reveal died. Because once he leaves and the other person comes out, Bethany, I just couldn't do it. I tried so hard. I couldn't find a way to get that same revelatory moment, because then we would have to be in Lydia's head, and then everything falls apart. Because as soon as we start thinking through her head, we know what she's doing. We know what she's seeing, what she's describing. There's like a layer. I wanted a moment of overlap where we still not sure what's going on. The bad guy's still trying to salvage the situation, and then he realizes that he's done. There's no getting out, and he's kind of sealed his own fate in this new version, where I kind of mentioned that he gave his enemy the tools to defeat him.
Well, and it's funny, going back to the whole vein of short stories, you think like, oh, you're just going to be writing from one perspective, but in the end, you had the challenge of having a perspective shift and therefore a voice shift. We needed to know that this was a different person, this was a different perspective, without it outright being like, and now it's so and so speaking. Like, And to be able to do that in, I mean, like the very last bit of time shows your strength as a writer, how you were able to take Jesse's voice, completely flip it, but give that reader enough time to be like, wait a minute, something's happening, flip it, different character, without almost like needing to structure it of like, okay, here's what happened. It was just a natural flow. And those are why I love short stories, is because you get these like amazing pieces of writing in just a short amount of time. Like it takes skill to pull that off well. And so it's just fun to see that, where it's like people like, you're just writing a quick short story about how I went to the grocery store, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, you have this like amazing character, and then you get to like, you got to write different voices in such a short piece. I don't know. It was just, writing short stories is hard. And I'm super excited that Lydia is out. It's just, I think people will really like it.
I've got a couple of things I'd like to say. 3 things. First of all, challenge accepted. I'm going to write a short story about going to the shops, and I'm going to make it interesting. And
I'd love
the
to
second thing, and the second thing is that we're talking about dialogue. I heard a piece of advice. I don't know where I heard it from. Probably the best piece of advice I was given for dialogue is if you had a conversation between a few people, you should be able to tell just from their dialogue who's talking. Because I know some people will talk similarly, but, take Harry Potter, for example. You can pretty much tell who's talking. Ron has a certain way of talking. Hermione has a certain way of talking. And the other thing as well is that I think with short stories, the ending is almost more important in a short story than it is for a novel. Because a novel, you can enjoy, a good 3/4 of the novel and still be satisfied regardless of the ending. Short story, I really think needs to have that really big payoff. Which Lydia 100% nails.
Thank you. So, God, if I'm not feeding you these segues, I swear to God, Danny just brought up another point. So I did have a dialogue problem that I didn't diagnose because in my head, I could hear my antagonist's voice really strongly. I didn't give him many quirks of speech. Or if you've read Save the Cat, an eye patch and a limp, I didn't give his speech anything special because in my head, he was just this bigger than life. His name is Kerry Evans, and he's a federal healthcare director, which means he has literally the power of life and death over people, and he can control people with this technology, this new technology that happens in the future. So because I could hear him talking, are you guilty? I would. One of the things I do when I write dialogue is I get up and look at myself in the mirror and I talk like the character. Like I want to hear what they're saying. I get up and act things out. I read a long time ago that Dickens did that. He had a floor-to-ceiling mirror and he would jump up and do it. So I started doing it too. God, try it. It actually does neat things. So, but Bethany recognized that because I was acting it out in my head when I wrote it, I didn't give him anything that the reader could pick up. So they sounded too much alike. The protagonist and antagonist sounded too much alike. Great note. So I went back and just added a couple of things just to make them sound different. And to me, it read a lot better. And that was a great note, Bethany. It was amazing.
I think part of like an editor's job is just to kind of like point out like, hey, like you're kind of close to it. I can kind of say this. And that, hi.
Keep going, Bethany.
When it goes to like really subtle changes can totally elevate the story. You don't have to like, I got to scrap the dialogue and start over. It's just a little changes could really elevate it. But yes.
So for those of you that don't know, this is Bat James.
Bat James.
That line
so
dance.
Bat James.
CO recognized. Okay. So little notes like that are what things I didn't expect working with an editor. So the first developmental edit I worked on was for a full-length novel, and it's for an editor that had just finished their training and wanted to use me kind of as an experiment and an advertisement for their new website. And then another time an agent got me with a developmental editor, which my agent story is such a horror story. I'm just not going to get into it. But I'm totally turned off by the whole process now. And so what happened, James? So what happened was they gave me, instead of coming back with like actual suggestions for how to fix things, they said you need to cut 5 characters in about 1/3 of the length, and can you make your heroine less mean or something like that? And I just felt like, I'm like, what? There was no specificity. It was bland generality. I didn't think that they really read the dang thing. And then working with Bethany was just like, like suggestions, like actual specific things that I could change. And it was just a breath of fresh air. So I've never seen it done like that. And now I kind of have a yardstick to measure editorial process by, because Bethany did such a good job.
Well, and it also depends. Like, we were talking, and you're like, oh, like, what are your thoughts on like editing something longer, like a sci-fi type thing? And like, that's not my favorite. I like the shorter stuff. But I'm like, oh, I know someone who like, she writes sci-fi, she reads sci-fi, and she's good. Like, you're always gonna have to like look for editors that is right for you. And I agree, reading their work, getting a sample, but like, one editor won't be best for all of your projects. Like, I'm probably gonna have an editor that I know eventually down the road edit Tracker, but I have someone else in mind for my short stories because they're very different. So like, again, with editors, don't rush into it. Like, don't do it. And then with the whole like comments and critiques, like, if someone just says, yeah, I want more detail for your setting, that's not helpful. If you say, hey, I want more sensory details, like for example, I forgot that the character was sitting on the floor. Can you remind me at some point? Was the floor cold? Was it wet? Was it sticky? Like, just something like that. And I always have to be careful not to give too many suggestions of like, oh, you could say it like this, because I don't want people to think that I'm trying to write their story. But, you know, examples always help. And if you're just beta reading or critiquing too, that's just a nice thing to do.
I actually feel like I can do a better job helping other people with their writing now that I saw how Bethany helped me. So, like,
I know we need to link up because I need to pick your brain about Tracker sometime.
I almost wrote you like your version of an editorial letter, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm an editor.
Good.
So, I actually got a question for Danny.
Yeah.
What's going on with the beard, man? Like, what's the plan? What's your plan for the future of your beard? Are there braids?
Well, I'm waiting for it to get long enough so I can work in the 5 commandments of beard growing. With growing a beard, target length, you've got to wait for the shortest parts of your beard to reach that length. So that way, when it's trimmed, it doesn't look like it's got potholes all through it. So I'm going to be caveman for a while. But that's the future of the beard. Just going to let it grow until it reaches the right length, then get it trimmed. The beard needs its own channel. Yeah.
Is that
Maybe.
like some lead vein inspiration right there?
Lead vein.
No, I've actually always wanted to sort of grow my beard out. Okay, what I was thinking of doing, because lead vein gets talked about a lot, what I might do is at some point I might revisit chapter 1 and tidy it up, get the prose a little bit cleaner, and then put the first chapter up on my website so people can actually see what we're talking about and get people drawn in. Kent made a funny suggestion, and I can't stop thinking about it now. He's talking about Lydia, and he's talking about the universes of lead vein and colliding. And I'm just like, oh my God, man. You're like, I would love to see that.
People do that. People do crossovers. You know, Stephen King actually mentioned Jack Reacher in The Dome, his novel The Dome, and Jack Reacher is another novelist's character. So they do that. They do crossovers.
Yeah. I also want to say that with short stories, this is a good opportunity. You said you didn't plan the ending of Lydia, and I think there's something to be said for doing that, because I had the ending for my short story that I was writing planned. When I reached the point where the ending was coming around, what I'd built up, I was like, this ending's not right. This is not satisfying enough. So I was like, I've got to go for the most satisfying, mind-blowing ending right now to suit the situation. So I wrote in an ending I didn't anticipate. And reading it back, I'm just like, that's it. That's it. Like, that's the way it should be. It suits that particular situation. It suits the way I'd build it up. I don't know whether that happens to you guys, though. Does it?
Bethany?
Well, I actually wrote a question in our Discord. I was like, okay, this is the first time it's ever happened to me where because I always write the ending first. It's my point of it's just, I need to know how it's going to end. I tried that once and I did not work. But I had one story where I was like, okay, I have two very different endings and I don't know what's best. And so if I don't know the ending when I start, I usually don't start the story until I know the ending. And so I've been experimenting and I'm really struggling. I don't know. I can't just write and come up with it. It's like your process is so different from how my brain works. And I wish I could do that because I could just start and see where I go. But, it's tough for me because, like, I'm stuck between two endings on One Piece and I feel totally helpless. I've never experienced that before.
Why don't you write both endings and then just have a few people read it and see what they say?
That's the plan.
That's like every movie ever made has two endings, and then they test them. So I was actually in the test audience for the movie The Mummy. Like,
No
it didn't even
way.
have its, like, the old Brendan Fraser, you know.
Yeah.
So, like, they didn't even have all the special effects in it. Like, there would be, like, little dialogue tags pop up. Dialogue tags. There'd be, what am I trying to say? Words pop up, you know, words, letters and stuff.
That we read.
And say a castle rises out of the desert. Like, it didn't even have the special effects. They had two endings, and one was so bad. Like, I can't tell you how bad it was. Someone spent money on that, but I don't think it's right or wrong to know the ending or not know the ending, because I've written stories where I know the ending, and I've written stories where I don't know the ending. I don't think there's a right way. I think you just do what you're doing and try hard and then trust. So this is the biggest mistake I made in my writing career. I wrote 6 novels before I let anybody read anything, except maybe some short stories. And that's a huge mistake because I didn't know what was working and what wasn't. You know, and I think if we trust our beta readers, if 90% of your beta readers hate the ending, your ending sucks. If 50% of them hate it, 50% of them like it, tie goes to the writer. But I don't think you need to know the ending to write a good ending. I don't think it's bad to write the ending first. But damn, just write the damn thing.
I love that we all have our own unique process, and it's just, I don't know, it's fun. And I think it all starts with find your process through writing short stories.
Oh, see, and that's why originally this was just going to be like a recap of me and Bethany working on Lydia. And now, and even as we were talking about it, I started going, I think it's really important to talk about, like we're saving the world or something. It's really important to talk about the iterative process of getting good at something. You don't get good at anything that you don't do over and over and over again. That excellence is a habit. It's a thing you do over and over again. So if you want to get good at writing, just write things over and over and over again. And you can't do it with long fiction. And even though I really want to be a novelist, like a lot, like that's my goal in life, is to write novels and have people read them and make enough money for ramen and bottled water, but and occasionally vodka. But I mean, not right now. This cup is just water and also water. But my point is, you have to be able to repeat the process, and short stories are the way to do it. And I'm going to try some flash fiction out. You've inspired me, Bethany.
Yes, I want to do like a flash fiction challenge or something like that. That would be so fun. But I mean, there's also people like Danny that's like, I'm going to write a short story. We'll see how it goes. And it's amazing. It's like, okay, where'd you come up with that?
Danny is a rare creature. Danny hit a home run his first time up at bat. He'd never held a baseball bat. He'd never seen a pitch. It's like the weirdest thing ever. Like Secret
It's
Santa.
like, here's a little thing that I've been tinkering with, whatever. It's like, what? This feels so, like, I don't know. It's just so funny how, like, I think that kind of shows, like, some innate talent where you're like, okay, like, I'm just going to mess around, write a short story, and it was so good. Like, that's really encouraging. I hope you feel encouraged by that.
Of course, absolutely. I think everything's got to sort of meet a standard in my mind. But like the idea for Secret Santa was really just like an experience I had in life, and it was like, what if this went one step further? What if this happened in this situation? And it was peculiar enough for me to say, all right, I'm gonna have to write this. And the same thing with Matt Garron, my current short story whip. It's the same thing. It's a peculiar enough situation that like, I've got to write this. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that comes out. It might be garbage yet, but I think also it helps that I was started to write a novel before I wrote Secret Santa, and the novel I was writing, it's at the time was so insanely bad. Like you can even find. I'm gonna expose myself here a bit, not on camera, but
not maybe.
Yeah. Well, but
family show here on YouTube channel.
Whoa. So I actually have the original garbage concept version of Voice of the Broken. It wasn't called that at the time, on Wattpad. You can go and find it. Ken's like straight away.
So vulnerable, man. I'm impressed.
Well, I don't care because I was a crap writer. Like, it's no secret. I was a crap writer. But and I've come a long way. I've come a long way in the last 3 months.
Well, hang on. The natural state of everyone is to be a crap writer. That's
the normal.
See, I almost think because you hit a home run on your first story that it actually was hard for you, because I'm always saying, people don't believe me, I've written 200 short stories, but I really have. And I got to tell you, 110 of them really suck. So you can't, and even great writers, I was reading something of Stephen King's just recently, and I could fix it. There's problems. Objectively, not subjectively, there's objective problems with the narrative. There's holes, and he's a genius, but he can't hit a home run every time. Nobody can. So I think for you started off with a bang, and then you got down in the trenches and went, oh man, this is hard. And that's okay, and that's good. And I think that sometimes writing bad things is so good for you, because you can see it and see that it's bad. And then if you could fix it, then nothing would ever bother you ever again. If you wrote a bad scene, if you wrote a bad plot point, you would never be afraid of it ever again, because you're like, I can fix this. It's not the end of the world. And that's why I think working with Bethany on this through this editorial process was such a big deal for me, because honestly, I didn't think Lydia was salvageable, because I tried a really hard thing. The protagonist is not talking in the room, but they're affecting the situation. I didn't think I could pull it off, but she showed me how I could do it, because, dude, nobody writes it right the first time. Ever.
Yep.
So if you know that, then you don't have to be afraid anymore. You can say, I'm just going to write, and this, talking to you, Don, in the chat.
Yeah, Don.
You just write it. It doesn't need to be Lord of the Rings the first time around. I got a couple buddies here trying to write some high fantasy. I got Don in here. I think Jared's still in here, and they're beginners, and they're really into stuff like Robert Jordan and Lord of the Rings. This is tough stuff, man. You have to get in there in the trenches and suck. You're gonna have to write a really bad derivative plot that you just totally stole from Tolkien or somebody, and get that puppy out of you. And then once you do it and you realize I can fix this, then it's all. It's like getting a superpower. I love what Neil Gaiman says, and you're reading Gaiman right now, right?
Yeah,
Danny.
American Gods. Yeah,
American Gods. I just finished watching his masterclass again, and if you haven't, man, it's one of them. The only one I think on that's really worth the money. But go check it out. Renee might have a different opinion. I think she just watched the masterclass she loved, but He says, the thing I did is convince myself that this draft doesn't really matter. I can fix it later. And he says that to himself on every draft. So if you know that this can be fixed, you're never stressed out. I'm going to stop talking.
No, but I really think you're right, because I finished Voice of the Broken. So it's 80,000 words, first draft. And what I've said to Kent a number of times, I think I said to you, Bethany, as well, is that since I finished it, the story started like growing in my mind. And it's growing in my mind because after I finished it, I've learned more about structure and storytelling in general. And now it's like I'm thinking, okay, how can I apply these new principles that I've learned to this work? And it's just a first draft. Like if I could give anyone advice for getting through the first draft, is write a bad story, but get it out. Because if you give yourself permission to just don't try to write a bad story, but allow yourself to write a bad story. And like I said, you can fix it later. That was one thing I was doing with when I first started writing. Was I was thinking, I didn't know these people went through so many drafts. I was thinking they wrote maybe one draft and then the second one they tidied it up and it was done. And that was very naive. Me.
That would be so nice. My goodness.
That'd be good. But even the best stories, like even Secret Santa, like you guys give it a lot of praise, but it's in its fourth draft now still. So like it can still be, everything can be made better. What else I was going to say was, no, I forgot. Go for it.
Well, it's kind of, go ahead, Bethany.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm like the self-professed queen of rewriting. I love rewriting because I'm like, well, that sucked. Well, let me try again. Like, that's the process. Everyone has their own process. If you can write one draft.
Fail better.
Yeah, fail better. Fail better. Like, over and over. And eventually you get to the point. Well, like, you read the first draft of Tracker and my dad's reading it. And I had like this little like thread of self-doubt, but then I was like, wait a minute, like this draft is really not going to be like the final draft. I just need some feedback on certain things. So it's fine. Like this one doesn't even matter. Like it's fine.
I'm really glad you brought that up. So if you go back to like my old videos, like 10 tips to finish your first draft, I tell people, don't show it to anybody. And the reason I say that is because most of the people show their drafts to are just people. And they're going to go, this sucks. It's not going to help you. So, but if you have critique partners or an editor or people that write and understand which draft you're in. So like I read Tracker twice and enjoyed it both times. I know what draft it is. I can filter that. Like
it ain't a first one or it's not a finished one. That's for sure.
That's my point. And it's that, look, I've written about 1 million first drafts. So like my brain just filters that. I'm like, I should fix that. I don't even look at it. I'm looking for the bones, the structure, which is that's my strong point as a writer. That's the thing that I know a lot about. And I went out of my way to learn it. So I'm not going to even play like I don't know. So I read Joseph Campbell's A Hero with 1,000 Faces, like only 3 other people on the planet have. I read Carl Jung's Archetypes in the Collective Unconscious and Ion and all this crazy literary headspace stuff. So, and I did that stuff for a reason. And I did it because I always knew that, I don't want to be a total dork here. I always knew that story is like a part of the human condition. It isn't just a thing you make up. It pre-exists. So I feel like you have to know its pieces and parts if you really want to get inside. And I don't think I'm naturally talented enough to do it naturally. There are some people. But if you show your work to somebody that understands story, they can filter your ands and does and your stupid dialogue tags and your clunky sentences and your bad paragraphing. And I'm not saying any of those things. But they can filter that stuff and look for the bones. They can look for that central part.
Dad, can I have your phone, please? Dad, can I have the phone?
Give him what.
Hey, you want to say hello?
Yes.
Yeah. No? Okay. I'll be back in a minute.
I don't want to sound like I'm giving contradictory. Oh my God, Renee, you read Hero with 1,000 Faces? You're awesome. That thing is dense. But I think, I don't want to sound like I'm giving contradictory advice, but I think you can show an early draft to someone that you trust to understand that it's an early draft, and they can maybe point out something you can't see, and that can happen. And Bethany pointed out like 10 things I couldn't see in my short story. And honestly, it opened my eyes that I can do a way better writing with a good editor.
Well, and it was kind of with Tracker where I was like, I'm not going to show anybody. But then I got to a certain point where I was like, okay, and now I feel like I do. And I was super selective for my alpha readers. Super selective. Because it's like you don't show someone like, oh, hey, here's this like pencil sketch that I do, even though you know I can paint Picasso or whatever. So you just gotta like, well, like I know you're really good at structure and bones, and I was like, well, that's what I'm really worried about. So like, you're the right person. I have a couple of other people that I would love to beta read who are really great with prose and stuff. So it's knowing who to share it with, and in the end, you also have to just be okay being a little vulnerable and sharing.
I think it's really a strong point that should be driven home. That like some writer friends of mine have sent through some work and they got it in a Google Doc, and you can go in and start looking at it, and they've had other people read it, but the other people are drawing focus to the prose, and this is maybe a first, second draft, and they're just all their comments are, this line's a bit long, this sort of thing. And I've now started putting, I'm not going to talk about prose, we're just going to look at the overall thing and see if there's any inconsistencies or issues there and focus on that. So what Kent was saying, when you have someone who has that writer brain who's going to look for the developmental stuff, the overall stuff first, it saves you a lot of time changing lines that may get deleted later.
Oh, like I've worked with a lot of beginner writers. Like I love helping people get started, and that's kind of been the focus on my YouTube channel when I started it, was to just tell people, man, you can do this. You really can. It's a skill that can be learned, just like playing guitar or whatever. I mean, typing, whatever it is, it's just something you need reps. You need to understand what you're looking at. I don't think you can fix to yourself if you don't have an ear. I think that you're born with that. There's some people that are going to be bad forever, but most people can become very good at it. So I try to help people get started. Danny, you brought up such an amazing point. So the order in which you do things in crafting a story is important, and there is a right way. Now, there's a lot of things you can do anyway, but one thing you don't want to do is focus on prose when your story structure sucks, because you're just wasting time. Time is a real thing. It's finite. We only have so much. And I have a lot of stories in me I want to get out. I bet you do too. So don't go, this line's clunky, I need to fix it, when your hero has no all's lost moment. You don't even have a story yet. You don't have a crisis. You don't have progressive complications. You don't have the things that make things a story. Probably shouldn't worry about the perfect adjective for describing how somebody fell off a horse. So getting that straight first is so important. Like, I can't stress that enough. And I think that a lot of people, including me, have gone down rabbit holes of trying to make pretty sentences when we didn't tell a story. There are some books with some kind of clunky writing that have a great story that are really good. You want to talk? We talked about Ready Player One. That guy is not a good writer, but he made a really neat story. I couldn't put it down, and honestly, I would love to edit that book. It was some really bad writing, but the story's great. It's compelling, it's interesting, and it gets you.
It's a nostalgia, like that brought me in, and it's almost educational, the book, because the guy just goes, 1981, this happened, they designed this, and this is what happened, and it's really interesting, but it's almost like an itinerary at times. And I think it might have been Richard in the chat here on Instagram. He asked me a question, what book is a popular book that you have a bad opinion about? And that I put Ready Player One, because I love the video game stuff, but it was, from what I can remember, from what I've learned since I've read it, it was just telling. It was just, this happened in this world.
I will say this. Some people go so crazy about show versus tell. Sometimes you can just tell people things.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. There's a balance, always a balance, but that's like end stuff. Doesn't matter if you're showing this white room if no one knows what's going on. Like you just that's end stuff. And I always tell people like because some people have the opposite problem where they're like, I can't delete anything. This line is perfect. It's like, okay, copy and paste it into a document so you don't lose it. Like you're fine. But yeah, I like sharing work, but be selective. It's kind of like finding an editor. Find the right one for you, for what you need, all of that jazz.
Ben makes a good point here. Technically, all writing is telling. And
but I was going to say, but I feel that prose, a really good prose and a really good narrative voice can suck me in. Like, I don't know, it makes me feel comfortable listening to it. Makes me feel relaxed, makes me feel... it's hard to explain. It might be something I don't understand enough yet.
So I got a little reading recommendation for people that want to just see some great prose writing with almost no story. So a lot of literary fiction is like that, right? There's a writer named Don DeLillo, or DeLillo, I don't know how it's pronounced, Dondillo. Go check out his book Underworld or his book Americana. The plot, it's all theme, no plot, but every sentence you're like, how did he do that? How did he do that? And it's every sentence. So that's his skill, it's his talent. If I tried to write like that, I'd never get anywhere. You know, I think that some people are just blessed with an ability to string things together in a way that's unique and powerful. I don't think I'm that guy. But when
you have a clear writing voice.
Some of it. Go ahead, Dan.
No, like you have a clear narrative voice. Like everything I've read of yours, there's a Kent Shawn voice there. With Bethany, certainly Bethany has Bethany's voice. It's identifiable. I don't know whether I have that, but that's probably because I'm still really developing my writing ability.
I think I'd recognize your stuff without a name on it, to be honest.
And that's a testament as a writer. Like it takes a lot of time to cultivate your own unique voice and style, but then still being able to stretch it within certain parameters for depending on the scene and stuff. But like you were saying with Lydia, you had just come off of writing I'm getting all the titles mixed up.
Children of Doom.
Children of Doom. You had just come off of writing that. And so some of the prose within your story was very like point blank. Like you would sometimes just let a word speak for a lot more, and it didn't always work. And you were like, oh, that's because that's a big stylistic choice in Children of Doom. And you totally recognize that, especially since you had taken a break from it for a while. And so you had to refine the voice just a little bit to make it work a little bit more for this story and not Children of Doom. And so that's also one thing that's hard about writing multiple projects is sometimes your voices can bleed over and they end up sounding just the same when you want to have two different stories. Did you notice that after reading it, after a pretty big break from it, the Children of Doom voice coming out, or?
I haven't read Children in a while, which is that's the one that instantaneously got me agent attention, like my first novel. Like everybody wanted a full read right away. So I don't know if that's probably a little bit like Danny, like I just got lucky on the first one, and it's very heavy-handed like that voice. Like there's a lot of it's almost minimalistic writing, but it's a sci-fi action adventure thing. But I tried to write it like freaking Hemingway, you know. I tried to like very short sentences, letting like one sentence paragraphs often, like a lot of that kind of stuff. And then I was trying to do something different with Lydia. But the thing that I didn't understand and that you really pointed out to me is that I can't have all these complicated things to explain in a short story. It won't get me anywhere. Children of Doom, I had 180,000 words to build a world. I got 5,800 in this one. So a lot of things had to be let go. I remember so the section of your editorial letter that mortified me the most was the special term.
terms.
I was just I was chewing the inside. I actually filmed myself reading that. So if anybody wants to watch it, you can go watch one of my videos on working with an editor. I filmed myself reading the editorial letter because I thought it would be good YouTube.
Got your visceral reaction.
So when I make little things up, they just pop in my head and I can see them. Like I can see it, I can taste it, I can feel it. It's real to me. And if somebody else doesn't get it, that's like you telling me my kid is ugly. Like there was like this real moment where I was hating Bethany like a lot for just like a few sentences, and I was like, get over it, just trying to help you. But some of it on the second or third time I thought it through, I got rid of some of that stuff. Like people's homes were called life cells. What's the point of that? Sounded cool to me because I wanted the idea that everybody's cramped into little houses in the future, you know, this little thing like a little hole in the wall. But there's no time to explain it. It didn't add anything to the story. So when
I forgot to mention the whole medical brain. I have a medical background, so it's like cell. Does that have something to do with the medicine? Blah blah. Anyway, I digress. Continue.
But the point is, and then this is why I think editorial, an editor, an objective third party that you trust is such a big deal, because I was able to fix a lot of things that I didn't even know needed fixing. And once I kind of gave in to the process and kind of let go of my ego a little bit, which is really hard for me. I'm probably super insecure. So like, I want to be right all the time. Right. You know, especially I think all writers are insecure because we're like making shit up and hoping everybody will come play with our imaginary friends. So, so I don't want people to not like my imaginary friends and all their made up stuff. So when Bethany told me like some of the stuff wasn't working, it was rough on me. I'm not gonna lie, man. I bit the inside of my lip till it bled.
Yeah.
But I do
stuff.
You should. I think we cut that from like the editing debrief video because there was so many spoilers. But like Kent was just like, "What were you thinking?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't get it." You're like, "But why?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't." He's like, "But how?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I'm rereading it, and you're right. Okay."
Yeah, but the thing is, and even if you got it on the second read, that means I didn't do it good enough.
Yeah, but there was also a couple of them where you're like, it's very black and white right here. I'm like, yeah, I think it's just my lack of sci-fi is showing. Like, because if you had beta readers that got it, then that's why you need to be strong in like your story, and you need to know what you will and will not change. Like, just don't follow an editor blindly.
I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. I firmly believe, and if anybody ever wants to go back and watch my long, convoluted video on genre, I think that people think that fantasy and sci-fi is a content genre, and it isn't. It's a reality genre, which means the world in which it takes place. Stories are stories. They're love stories, action stories, adventure stories, crime stories, war stories, romance stories. That's just a backdrop. Elves and knights and lasers do not a story make. They're just elements. So I think that even someone that doesn't read a lot of sci-fi can diagnose story problems. You guys tell me what you think. I'm not trying to speak for everybody else. I think they can diagnose story problems in a genre that's not necessarily their own.
To add to that, I get asked sometimes, what genre do you write? What genre do you read? And I say, I will write and I will read anything if it's a good story. And I hope this is right, characters drive the story. So if you've got good characters with good story, it could be in the middle of a medieval fight, a space battle, or just contemporary. If it's good characters and a good story between those characters, I'll still read it. I'll write it. What do you guys think?
I just want to highlight real quick, Dan Hook. I just found his channel the other day, and I really enjoyed listening to him talk about writing. You guys jump over there and check him out, man. He's a cool guy. He's brand new, not brand new to Authortube, but really worth going and checking out. I was glad to meet him the other day.
Sweet. There was another thing I want to ask you guys. I've been telling a lot of people about a short story contest to say, hey, all you got to do is write a short story under 5,000 words. That's it. That's the only rule. And the response 9 times out of 10 is, I don't think I could write something that short.
Ooh.
Now, how I'm like, well, give us some of that because I need to write more. But what is your guys' like advice for writing a story and keeping it under 5,000 Ks? Like, what's making these people go beyond 5,000 K words?
So, I'm sorry, Ben, just making me laugh, man. By the way, Ben Millen is here. He's the author of, I don't want to say this wrong, Zolantis, and he's got a book about, it's concerning trolls. Is that it? Or the secrets of trolls? Damn, I'm sorry, Ben, or potentially Benjamin. But he's a self-published author and Authortuber. Go check him out. I have trouble writing stories under 5,000 words. I'm not going to lie. But I can, because I'm in control of what I write, not some like mystical zeitgeist. So I think everybody needs to like get off there. Thank you, Ben, on the subject of trolls. I apologize. And I actually have one of his books on my reading list. So I'm going to be reading Ben here pretty soon. Guys, and this is to anybody listening or listens to this later, I have 20 submissions for our short story competition, and submissions close July 1st. That aren't just, if there were a couple words over 5K, I'd be like, whatever, man. But you're not even close. I'm talking like 12,000, 13,500. Man, I got to tell you, you're killing me, Smalls. You can control your story. You can plan your story. And if you can't, then something else is controlling you, and that's maybe not a good thing. Writers have to be able to, if you're going to be a traditionally published author, they're going to tell you how many words you get. If you're going to, and I learned that working with an agent, they will take control of your work. There's all kinds of strictures. There are genre obligatory, I don't even know how to say this right. Look, every genre has a word count expectation attached to it. If you go too far outside of it, people won't read it. And that sounds like horrible and Nazi and not fair, but that's the way it is. So, you know, if you write 250,000 word novels, you better not be writing freaking middle grade fiction because no one's reading it. If you write a 20,000 word thing and call it a science fiction novel, science fiction readers that want to get immersed in a world, they're not coming. So if you can't write 5K or less, maybe there's something that needs to be addressed. And also, somebody else talk because I'm getting upset.
I think sometimes when people write too much, it's because their little nugget of their story idea is not well thought out. And they're almost doing like a discovery writing that has produced a fun 12,000 word short story. But like for me, I'm a classic underwriter, and so like 2,000 to 3,000, I'm like perfect short story length. But I recently found myself writing a story that was closer to the 8,000 word mark, which is a little longer than my normal, and that's because the more time I spent on it, the more I could add like, oh, here's a subplot. Oh, I want to do a little fun little character arc with this one minor character, which is all adding to the story. But if you have a word count length, stick to 1 or 2 character arcs. You can have more than those characters, but make it so your readers will connect with those 1 or 2 really well, and quit treating it kind of like a full-length novel. I don't know. That's probably one of my struggles, is because it's just, with writing short stories, it's something that I just have done. I don't really know how. I just do it.
Well,
my take on it is, when I come up with a short story idea, it's generally just a single scene. So the way I see it is you can think about like 5,000 words is probably a fairly long chapter, or a fairly regular chapter length. Imagine if you had you're writing a chapter, it was just a single scene, but it had a profound conclusion. And the cast is relatively small, 1 to 2 people, maybe 3. Your protagonist still has to have, like Ken says, value shift, an arc, They have to have a want. They have to have the want is the lie they believe in, and what they need is the truth that they discover. And try and incorporate that into 5,000 words. But if you just reduce it down to a single scene, a single situation, like Secret Santa is, a guy gets a love letter. He's trying to find out who wrote it. Matt Garron is a guy asks the main character on the stage and asks him to do something very questionable. It's just that single little moment, that single little unusual scene that can have a very big payoff at the end. I think you could probably write something around 5,000 words just with those rules, and especially what these guys said.
So how long was Secret Santa? Off the top of my head, I want to say it was like 7K. Is that about right?
No, it was originally it was about 5,500. Now it's down to about 5,400 or so.
Oh, shorter than I thought.
I've actually shortened it up, but added more in. Now there's a challenge.
So, but by the way, Bethany, this is the first time that I rewrote something and didn't shorten it. So, and the reason I did that is because of your suggestions. It's because the editorial suggestions weren't take this out. It was all add this, add this, add this. And I remember thinking, I have this little Post-it above my computer that says, and it's from one of Stephen King's recommendations from On Writing, where he says, second draft is first draft minus 10%. And I was really trying to do that, and I just couldn't, and add all the things that you talked about. It was really hard, but I've learned that there's no absolute rules. All rules can be broken as long as they're within the bounds of the structure. So I think for something like, I'm going to go way off the rails here, so I better stop myself. I was going to say, I think for something like, actually, I think Secret Santa is a great example. Have you ever put that up for everybody to read, Danny?
No, but I will.
We keep talking about it.
I'll put it on my website, and I'll put the first chapter of Lead Vein on the website.
I like that. So
two very different stories.
So all Authortubers either currently listening or that are watching this later, if you don't have things up that people can read, I don't know how to like connect with people. It makes it really hard for me to understand like where we are in this giant continuum of writing and reading and all this cool stuff that we're doing. If I can't read what you're doing, because it's who you are. And I think that all of us need to be brave and put something up where people can come see it. And I'm not saying that if you don't do that, that you're not like a good part of the community, but I really think that it's important for all of us to have a literary presence other than talking about writing. And I just want to encourage everybody to put stuff up and be brave, and let's all read it. And I think that I've gotten more out of doing that than I ever thought I would. I never would have worked with Bethany. Really meeting, I'm just going to go ahead and gush on Danny here for a minute. Meeting Danny is the catalyst that got a lot of people, letting a lot of people read my stuff. It's just because I've been doing this all by myself, all alone. And I've probably improved more in the last 6 or 7 months than I have in 6 or 7 years, because I let people read it. And then they told me. So put yourself out there. It's worth it. And it sucks. And you have to be brave. And you're going to get some knocks along the way. But if you do, but that's like getting good at anything. You know, like writing is the only freaking subject in the world where everybody's like, I just wrote a book. It's going to be great. Nobody would be like, I want to be a professional baseball player. I played 1 game. I'm good. But nobody else does that but writers. So go ahead, get out there, take your knocks, and be brave. That's all I'm saying.
We're all on the same team here. We all want to make our stuff great and help each other make our stuff great. Like, especially in this community, I've spoken about the community 1,000 times, and I can't get tired of it, because there is no community in the 32 years that I've existed on this planet that has been as welcoming as this one.
I mean, I've only been around for 5 years, but I'm just saying.
I think one thing is, like, if you're having a really tough time with your writing group and your writing community and you don't feel supported, that's not a writing community. And so, like, find a group of people because we all want the same thing. We all want to produce really good books. We all want to write really well, and it's rewarding to help each other out. You're going to learn as you help each other out. But if you're having a terrible time in your writing group, you're not in the right writing group. And maybe it's time to branch out. But I've had nothing but amazing connections through Authortube. So I don't know what it's like for everybody, but I've had a really great time, and I've met a lot of wicked awesome people.
So I hate how every conversation comes back to like Authortube, but it has to, because you can't do this by yourself. And I think working with Bethany, working with an editor, and all that, like doing this series together, which actually I popped the question to her. I asked her. Married, and so am I. But asked her to do this with me. I did it to her on a live stream without asking her in advance, because I like doing stuff like that. I'm a giant jerk, and I intend to continue on that path. But
perfect.
Yeah.
But you did it in a really tasteful way. Like you did a really nice. We don't like Bethany. I want you.
So
that might have been like.
I do really believe that you can't become a writer on your own. I don't think anybody does, and or you can, but it's going to take way longer. And all these different people have something to offer. I had no idea what I was going to get out of working with Bethany when we started doing this. I had no idea what I was going to get out of sharing work back and forth with Danny originally. I had no idea that Z Falk was going to talk me into giving her the first draft of my novella that's coming out this year. Somehow she talked me into giving her a first draft. I've literally never been manipulated like that in my life. But so all these people that I've met, I'm writing more than I ever have, which is really saying something. And more people have read it, and I'm more ready to put stuff out there and just try. And I think that short fiction is the way to do it. That's why we're having this short story competition. Like, I'm not making any money on this. I'm spending money to do this short story competition. And the only reason I'm doing it is to get to see people get out there, put their stuff out there, stick their foot in that hot water, and let people read what you're doing. And also to give people deadlines so they don't procrastinate and finish what they're doing. And understand that I can write 5,000 words of good stuff in a couple of months. I can do it in a week. I can do it. So anybody out there, send us your short stories under 5K. If you're a couple words over 5K, I'm not going to kick you out because that's just dumb. But try, be brave, be strong and courageous.
You can do this. And if you think about it, if you can write 5,000 words or less of pure reading bliss, imagine what you can do when you write your novel.
Well, then the novel's just 5,000 words at a time. So, and that's why I don't want to like start gushing on the 5 commandments of story, but that's why I really think that scene work and short fiction work is probably the most important thing. Because you're just doing that over and over and over and over again. So if you can do like what Bethany does, which is just write this little encapsulated piece of flash that has tone and theme and arc and all of that in just a couple sentences, like Coffee with the Devil is probably the best example of what you sent me that was really, really hit hard in just a few words and was really impactful. Like if you can do that, then you can just do it again and again and again, and your story starts to come together. So
I think no, you go ahead.
Oh, go for it. No, you got it.
I remember when I was researching, Bethany sent Kent and I a small flash fiction piece called Birthday or Fingers. And yeah. And because I hadn't had really any experience with short, flash fiction or anything like that, I actually researched it. And I came across it might have been a 6-word, only 6 words flash piece. And this is how powerful it is. It was for sale, baby shoes, never worn. You see the power behind just those 6 words. So 5,000 words, in comparison, you've got a lot to play with.
Yep.
I just
Well,
think
and Richard said something interesting where he was like, it's a. Oh, sorry. Richard just said, like, it's a good short story when people are like, oh, that could be the start of a novel. And, like, going back to Lydia, I was telling Kent, I was like, this is like a prologue to something amazing. Like, this is the catalyst.
Absolutely.
This is where the revolution starts. Are we going to get to know more? And, like, it's a short story. It has an ending, but I want more. I'm not left, like, unsatisfied, but it was so good. I just want more. And, like, that's a really great compliment. But so, like, I've entered some pieces for, like, competitions and for publication of their parts of Tracker. Like, one of Clay's backstory scenes, you might know which one I'm talking about, and it was picked up and it was published as a short story, even though it was a part of a bigger thing. So it's like each scene has those beats, and you can maybe take one out of your story and it is a complete short story in itself. So I don't know, sometimes that helps to look at it that way.
Okay, so I hear some people in the chat saying they're going to get me some stories. I want to see these things.
Yeah.
I don't want it to end up being like win by default because everybody wrote too long a thing. So just to quickly talk about what's going on, 5K words or less, any genre. No subject matter is taboo. If you want to get in there and try something rough, get in there and try it. We want to read it. And then me, Danny, and our guest judges are going to read them all through. And the top prize is $100. And that's either through PayPal or Amazon gift card, your choice. And the second and third place get $25. That's not much money. But the top 5 stories are going to get featured in videos and on our websites. People are going to get to see you, potentially get interviewed. And the point of this is not to, well, obviously we all want to get together and do stuff. But the point of this is to start showing the community what's out there, what people are doing, and then to start hearing other people's voices and like, what are they writing? What are other people thinking? What are they trying? Should I try something like that? Maybe I should link up with this person. Maybe we should trade reads. Maybe this could be a good critique partner. I was really impressed with this person. Like, it's not about your story is better than your story. It's about let's highlight some of what people are doing in the community and give everybody a big kick in the behind and make you freaking finish something.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing we haven't spoken about, and I was going to bring up, is a number of months ago, Katie Wilson and I came up with this challenge called the Wrench Challenge.
Oh, that was great.
And we got talking about this idea. Katie was like, hey, let's try and write, a little opener off a song title, the title alone. So, I don't know, another one bites the dust. Could be, I don't know, it could be the start of a war scene, for example. And and then I had to send Katie a thing called a wrench. I'm throwing a wrench in her work. I don't know what she's written, and she doesn't know what I'm sending. And the challenge is to try and write this thing into that scene. And I found that through doing that challenge, it was a really good exercise in pushing the limits of my writer brain to making things work and seem, believable and fluent. So very soon, I'm going to revive that challenge. I'm going to tag a bunch of people.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I want to play.
Oh, I'll tag you. Done.
Nobody ever tags me.
Tag you at everything.
I'm not taggable. I'm telling you right now, because I get messages from people. I don't want to drag away attention from this. I actually want to talk about writing challenges and like how that's another way to use short fiction to like get better, because that's kind of how you and me first linked up, Danny, was doing a couple of those together. And and this is something I think we need to start tagging Bethany in, because I think she's gonna shine like a star for this stuff. But what's going on? People go, I was wanting to tag you, but I didn't want to bother you. I'm like, what? Like, I'm not doing the same thing you are, man, or lady, or whatever. It's like, they're like, oh, I didn't want to bother you. You're doing your thing, you're something, you're doing this thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm just some dork in here with a couple of guitars and Marvel pictures on my wall.
Eyeliner.
Whatever, man, tag me. I don't care who you are. Tag me. Okay, back to what Danny was talking about. I just want to know, like, I'm standing. Am I doing something different than everyone else? But anyway, I don't know why I went off on that. But I didn't know how much I was going to get out of these little writing challenges. So Katie Wilson and Danny linked up and started a series of these things that were really cool. And I jumped on a few of them, and I had to write something quick because, you know, I'm on a schedule like everybody else, man. But I had to write quick, and it kind of forced me to get creative fast. And it was fun. And it wasn't just fun. I got to see what everybody else did with it. It was so different than what I did. And I really liked the wrench. I liked the 5-word writing challenge, which where people gave you 5 random words. And Sarah was collaborating with us. She's not really around anymore. But she gave me really interesting words to work on. And that little piece of short fiction that I wrote, I really liked it. Like I liked what I wrote for. And I
did something really weird. I was tagged by Dahlia Burrows to do a character creation challenge. And so I created, and we just drew things out of a hat. That was the attributes of our character. Then we had to write them into a scene. And I created this little goblin dude with a Cockney accent who lives on the side of a volcano with his grandma. And then the next writing challenge, which was the 4-word writing challenge, I wrote a bloke called Dwayne, who was like a gunslinger. That was, I guess you could say, sort of slightly based off The Dark Tower. And then the next writing challenge, I wrote another character who was called a Deathbringer, who was a female character. I don't have any problems writing female characters or male characters. I love doing that. And then I brought all those 3 universes together in that final story. That was an awesome challenge to do that.
It seems like a funny type of thing to do, but actually there's a really popular contest that I've done at different times. They do short story, flash fiction, and microfiction, where it's a contest, a tiered contest, try and make it to the next round, where you get a setting, an idea, and a word that you have to use. And it's just like your challenge, but you have 24 or 48 hours depending on how long of a story that you are in for the competition. So I did one for flash fiction, and it was like, I got a tattoo parlor, it had to be a ghost story, and I had to use the word, like, I don't even remember what it was. But
I like those constraints.
But it's like it's a very common thing. Like you're creative. Like you'll come up with a story, but how well are you going to write that story? Like, yeah. So
well,
also found. Yeah, you're right, Kent. You go.
I like constraints. So I'm always talking about. I get on my soapbox so often. I'm always talking about how if you just think, if people go, you can write whatever you want. I'm like, that doesn't help at all. Like when you're trying to come up with a story, you need something to like start shrinking chaos down into some manageable chunk. That's why I love the hero's journey. I'm like, you need
shrinking Charlotte.
you need some kind of like things to attack. You need problems to solve, specific problems to solve, to start kind of shrinking this. There's too many options. So when somebody gives me a challenge like that, I used to not like it. I used to not want to do writing prompts or writing challenges. I'm like, no, I just want to come up with my own stuff. Now when somebody gives me that, I'm like, this is an opportunity to make myself think on my feet. It's an opportunity to put constraints, because constraints actually set you free. I think I have a video about that. Rules will set you free. They really do, because now I know, okay, it has to be in Victorian England. Okay, I know where it's at. It actually solved a problem. It's not a problem. It solved a problem. So that's why I think these writing challenges, especially these really short pieces we all were writing, really helped me out. And I want to do it again.
Yeah, I really love the 4-word challenge. It was really good because when you connect 4 random words together, for me it was exercising the part of me that was creating an idea. So I was given like Gouda, tortoise, something else, like these 4 completely unrelated words, but it was like, how could I make these connect? In what situation or setting would this connect? And it was like, okay, I'm going to make this like a medieval sort of thing, and I'm really trying my hand at some fantasy writing here. Never written fantasy, just straight fantasy before in my life. So and it was great. I found myself really enjoying that. I was discovering that I liked writing in that sort of setting, that kind of genre, and then afterwards I sort of look back and go, I learned a lot from this that I can then use in my main work.
Man,
Oh,
we're about 2 hours
solid.
deep here, guys. What do we want to keep going, or do we want to start to wrap this up? I know Charlotte's got on her Charlotte Armstrong on her channel starting in about, I think, 30 minutes. Is that right, Charlotte?
Yeah.
She's got a live stream going. I'm probably gonna pop over there and say what's up.
Thank
But also I just want to like kind of sum up.
I just got a reminder just then as you said that.
I want to kind of sum up what we did here. So this was 2 things. This was how short stories are really important for getting good at what you do, man. You just get to do it over and over again. You get to practice. And then I also want to say that working with Bethany on Lydia was an incredible experience for me. It had ups and downs. It definitely had some drama in it with the change attempts.
Yeah, but we're still friends.
I almost wish I'd made one of those work, but it's like I couldn't give up on the reveal. And I think I do feel good about trusting my instincts on that. But if I'd originally designed the story and tried it in first person, I think I could have pulled it off. And I never would have thought of doing that without you. So I really appreciate that.
It was fun, and I'm honored that you thought of me. And then it's always exciting seeing the finished product, and it's even more exciting when it's really good. And so that's just a joy to be a part of. It's like it's so strong, because I mean I can tell you some client horror stories, and so sometimes it's like I don't want you to tell anyone I was a part of this, because I do not condone where you went with this at all. But it's really exciting to be a part of a project that's so public, where it's like I'm really proud that I got to like be a little part of that. So you should be very proud of it. And if you haven't read it, go to kentshawn.com and click the Lydia tab.
Half an hour if that. Quick read.
Not
Just
even,
get in there and
yeah.
read it. Yeah.
So, and last but not least, please send us your 5K or less story. Come check out Danny's channel. He's got a video on both Danny and my channel. There are videos with all the details to the contest. I'm going to throw up a page this weekend on my website that gives details. All you got to do is send your story to me at kentshawnauthor@gmail.com. Danny's going to read it. I'm going to read it. Z-Falk's going to read it. Tim McSoul's going to read it. Those are our guest judges. And this is going to keep going. I'm not stopping here. So I don't care if, well, I already have more than that, but I don't care if I only get 20 or 30 entries per time. This is going to keep running. So keep writing and send us your stories. And you never know. You may win $100. You may get featured, and a whole bunch of people may read what you wrote. I don't know if that helps. That may actually terrify you. But I'm super excited. I've already read 2 of the stories, and there's a really strong story in our bunch, and I think it's probably going to end up in the top 3. So I'm really excited, but send it to us. Rich Holiday, I want to see your stuff. Dan Hooker, if you're still here, I want to see your stuff.
Do it.
Don, where you at? Jared, where you at? Let's see it. So bring it. Bring the heat, and let's do this thing. Any last comments, Dan?
Number one, if you write something on a 5,000K and for some reason you don't think it's good enough, send it anyways.
Right.
Send it anyways, because you might be onto something. I don't really have any other closing comments, really. I think we covered everything really well with short fiction, that sort of thing. Just thank you very much for having me on the channel.
Bethany, any last comments on editing, working with the editor kind of stuff?
No, you just gotta write something, and then you can worry about having an editor.
Good advice.
No, it's fine. Just get to know people in the community, and you can work your way up to it. And a great way of doing that is the short story competition that I know of. It's due July 1st. Only 5,000 words, so
in case you don't know the contest title, it's the – hang on, I got to take a deep breath. Wait for it. All inspiring, cup destroying, head balding. Did I mess it up? Awe-inspiring, cup
Awe-inspiring, cup destroying, pencil snapping, pen trading, head balling, metaphor mangling, sentence spewing, cash reward reaping, short story contest to do.
Boom!
I think I
Got him.
I've said it 50 times on video.
You've said it so much that your body's just like, please, just don't do it to me again.
On the last video, I got ready to do it, and Angie was back there directing me. And she goes, "Why are you waiting?" I go, "I can't believe I'm doing this again." All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you hanging out. And have a great day. Go to Charlotte's channel. You must. We're all going to write it. Good at things.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, bye.
Let's get into it.